And we're back, everybody. It's your host, Darren Carter, the party starter. And we have the one and only Mr. Eddie Berke.
Eddie Berke with Darren Carter, the party starter.
Oh, man, it's so good to see your face, man. It's, gosh. It's
good to see anybody's face these days. It's really crazy.
I know.
Been so nuts. It's just to you talk to somebody and it's like, oh my God, it's really been like, what, 7 months, 6 months, 7 months? And people have sort of been in touch with each other, but every time I talk to somebody, everybody's kind of like, I haven't seen so-and-so in 6 months. And you go like, God, we used to see each other every day or 4 days, whatever, a week.
I know.
Here we are. Now we're zooming in.
Zooming in. I know, right? It's like, I've had a couple of times when I ran into a couple of comedians about 3 months ago. And at that point I hadn't seen anybody in 3 months. And it was so great to see them. And it was just like, and now, it was just like there's people you plan to see, but I'm talking running into somebody by accident, like just, right. That's not happening right now with me that often. It's so rare that it's happening.
I doubt it's happening with anybody because there's no place to run into anybody unless you do it at a grocery store or something like that. But, as you know, the Improv is opening up the patio this Friday. On the 9th, I believe it is. And so, at least they're starting up a little bit. Unfortunately, I will not be there. I'm dying to go, but I've got some back surgery coming up and I have to lay low for a bit. Yeah. But that should be a lot of fun. I'll bet there's going to be a lot of people there.
There's so much that I want to get into you. Okay. You're an actor. You've worked at the Improv for 40 years. I was at the big celebration. I was so happy to be a part of that. But I want to start with, I listened to one of your episodes on your podcast. Say the name, please. I want to make sure it's correctly.
Eddie's Bar at the Improv podcast. It's for those of you who haven't listened, there's some really great people. We got a lot of great stories from the past and people, like I had the last two were like Paul Provenza and John Biner. Remember John Biner?
Yeah.
Oh, what a treat to be able to talk to him.
I was listening to the one with John Biner and, I didn't know this about you. I knew you're from the East Coast, but I didn't know that you're from originally, I guess you're from New York City. You're from New York?
I'm born and raised in Manhattan. And a real regular New Yorker and all. Yeah. And, I'd never really lost that edge. As a lot of people will tell you across the bar. They go like, you're from New York, aren't you? Just order your drink.
Yeah. But you're like I would consider you a friendly bartender. Like you're not like when I see you, you're always like, hey, Darren. You go out of your way to make people feel welcome, and that's probably the difference between a real New Yorker and a pretend person who's trying to be. I'm a tough guy, but they're not. They don't. They're doing what their imitation of what they think a New Yorker is. But
I agree. I think in my case, I think I'm friendly. Some people don't. But it is just my way about me because I'm from New York. That's how I was born and raised, It's like, hey, what do you want? It's like, stuff like that.
What's interesting is I heard you and John Biner, he was talking about like some of those clubs in New York back in the day. And he said, but that New York isn't there any longer. And you guys, but then you guys said, well, then again, Malibu isn't what Malibu used to be. And I listened to this audio book. I think it's called the Thunderbolt Kid. And believe it or not, it's something that you wouldn't think that I would be interested in. But it was all about this guy's childhood, and he was born way before I was born. But he talks about being a kid of the 1950s, living in Des Moines, Iowa. And I'm telling you, Eddie, that book was really interesting because it just transported you to a different time and place. Thunderbolt Kid.
I'm not familiar with that.
By Bill Bryson. And at the end of the book, he said, even like 30 years ago, he goes, that place in his mind was no longer there. And he said that what happens is, the chain restaurants come in and the different things, and it all becomes homogenous. Like, back then he said, like, Des Moines, Iowa, you had, your specific restaurants and the Kitty Corral and all this certain things that were like big league.
That's probably the truth for most people coming from where they come from. You have all of these memories of how you grew up. Things were much simpler in the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s. Yeah. And we didn't have as many chains and stuff. And I'm not knocking it. It's just a change. But from what the book that you're talking about would be the same thing. If I wrote a book, it would be all about my childhood in New York, or my younger years in New York, and the fact that there are neighborhoods. There aren't just like Hollywood or West Hollywood. I mean, neighborhoods were a block or two, and that was it. And there were like 1 million people on each block. Yeah, that's New York. Wow. And so I can imagine for him with Des Moines, Iowa, that it was probably a very small town at that point. And he grew up there, and he has all these memories of some probably crossing the train tracks and stuff like that. That's probably great, and most people do. Where do you come from?
I come from Fresno, California.
And I'll bet you have memories like that too. When you were a kid. I mean, I'm sure. If I was a bartender, people would be like, "You must be from Fresno." I don't think so.
You put raisins in my drink, boy. What the hell's with these raisins? No.
That's funny, but it's so true. We all have our memories of our little block. Block of time when we grew up. And it's just so interesting, because if you talk to anybody that's kind of like up there in their years, like yours truly here, you'll find you find out things about areas that you had no idea. You find out things that they did, myself included, that weren't criminal acts then, and now they're like, they're against the law or whatever. It's like, it's crazy. It's just nuts. But being at the Improv has been a trip for 40 years. It really has.
And that's something I have to embrace what you said, because I used to, growing up in Fresno, I'd be like, I'd hear like, Eddie Murphy, or I'd hear Richard Pryor's story, or I'd hear, George Carlin. I'd be like, wow, I wish I was from an interesting place like these, and then you realize like, no, you are from an interesting place. You just have to dig inside and find out, because it's a completely different experience than somebody else, found out, you know what I mean? And they grew up with. So your father, I found out was he was a performer, and he used to perform in the Catskills.
Oh yeah, my father was a Catskill entertainer almost his whole adult life. He was what you would call a social director at a bunch of hotels. He was a singer. He'd MC the shows and perform. Through him, when I was a kid, I met Rodney Dangerfield when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
He came up there and performed. Jackie Mason too.
Wow.
Would come up at, they all went to these different hotels.
Do you remember if Rodney was, was he Rodney Dangerfield then, or was he, I think, Jack Roy, or a different name?
He had just changed his name to Rodney Dangerfield. And it didn't make a difference, because he didn't get any respect then either. So
did you when you were before we get into the improv talk, was it something? Because in my mind I picture what the Catskills was like. It seemed like it seemed great from what It
really was. We spent just about every summer of my youth up in the Catskills. We would leave I guess right before July 4th, and wouldn't come back till right after Labor Day. And the Catskills back then were just the place for everybody to go in the summertime. It was mainly like a Jewish getaway, back there. But that didn't mean it was only that. It was like there were so many things. It's where you met your first girlfriend and
Wow.
stuff like that, and you got. I mean,
Was it kind of like? I'm sorry. In my mind, is it sort of like what Vegas is? Was it like a series of resort hotels, and they all had their own showrooms and their shows? No, it wasn't that.
As far as the hotels go, yes, but they were not that close like that. They were like, you had to drive from one to the other. They weren't like, like here's MGM, here's whatever else there is. You can walk like on the strip there. This wasn't that. The Catskills weren't that way. If you went to a hotel, that's pretty much where you stayed your entire time. And because they had everything there. They had entertainment. You ate, they gave you 3 meals a day. It was like, you didn't, all you had to do was gain 10 pounds a week and you were fine.
That's cool. I've heard of,
when I look back, of course, back then, I don't think I appreciated it as much. But now when I look back and I think about it and then I talk to people like John Biner or even when 30 years ago when I last saw, I think, Jackie Mason, you talk to them about the Catskills and they all have great memories about it, in their own unique way. But everybody has, this is where people got started. This is where comedians went. Back then, in like, let's say the 60s, I don't recall. I mean, there may have been, the Improv in New York started in 63. And so you had that, but you didn't have many clubs back then. So it was a lot of comics. If they could get a gig at a bungalow colony or wherever, this is where they went to hone their craft.
I wonder if they'll have something like that again. They say history repeats itself. I think that'd be pretty cool.
So I think, times change, and again, this is not good or bad. They just change. And the people that are living today and coming up today, be it comedians, actors, lawyers, whatever, they're going to have their own memories of that time. So, like mine, I came up at that time. My memories are the Catskills of New York and all that, and the early days of the Improv. But most people are, whatever you've gone through now is what you're going to remember as back in the day.
Yeah, I was reading that, I'm reading this book about the history of comedy, and they talked about like in the, after World War II, there was a boom, like people had like extra money. And then from 1945 to 1955, and there was all these hotels and resorts being built in Florida, and comics would go down to Florida. And so I as a performer, I hope that sort of thing happens again, hopefully somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think if anything, under these circumstances, the first business to boom is going to be comedy, because people are going to want to get back and they want to laugh. They want to relax. It's been a horrible year, last 6, 7, 8 months. I guarantee you that the minute things open up, comedy is going to boom. There's just no other thing that you want to do. You want, all right, I'm going to go see Darren Carter, man. He's the party starter, and he's going to make me laugh, and he's going to do that gangland bit and whatever else. It's going to be a trip, and I honestly do think comedy is going to be the big boom.
Comedy it's a major, music and comedy to me are like a major escape. I love both music and comedy, and there's nothing like it. Even if you especially if you kind of discover something that's already been put out there, like a musician, and you're like, wow, these people have a great catalog of songs. And just like with comedy, it's the euphoria that you feel, those endorphins kick in.
And you used a very good word, and that's called escape. Because we all want to just escape. I've watched 632 action adventure movies in the last 6 months. I don't even know the names of them, and they're all the same. It's just like, for like 2 hours at a block, I'm somewhere else. All of a sudden I'm Jean-Claude Van Damme or I don't know, somebody. But it's
hilarious.
Escape is the right word, and comedy is going to be that first escape. I don't have any doubt about that. You know, as soon as they allow it's going to be tough. Don't get me wrong, because they're not going to allow the clubs to fill up. They're going to stick to this 25%, which is going to make it hard for the clubs to exist.
Yeah.
But if they can, those that can will hopefully reap the rewards.
And they are doing it in other parts of the country. So I know that there is that, and I'm seeing it. You're absolutely right. I'm seeing other parts of the country where they're like, it might be 25% or 50 or whatever, but they're like sold out shows, sold out. Like they'll just add more shows. They'll be like, okay, we're going to do, 3 shows on Sunday or 4 shows, or, they'll figure something out like that.
And that's what they're going to have to do. And that's like, I don't know, that's just like a very important thing for people to do, whether it's 25% or not. Yeah. Just a number of comics that I've talked to have told me like, I went and performed at so-and-so and the shows were sold out. But remember, sold out was 50 people instead of 200.
Yeah. And the Improv was making so many changes right before this. Like they were showing me like the new green rooms and what they were building with the podcast studio and the new entrance to the stage. Like,
and they'll be back.
Yeah.
They'll be back.
I can't wait to see what it looks like now. I haven't, I don't think actually, I want to say I was there in the beginning of March because I interviewed Jamie Kennedy for the podcast. And that's the last I saw of it. I went to Texas.
And that was pretty much I don't think too much was done after that before the closure. But these guys that run the Improvs are really working hard to get it back to where it was. And unfortunately, this was, a smack in the face.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Let's to change gears here. You've been at the Hollywood Improv, since 1980, I want to say 79, 80, 79. Yeah. Wow. And when you see different comedians coming in and out, and you've known a lot of comics, you've seen them rise, you've seen them fall, you've seen so many things. Can you tell if a comedian is going to make it? Is there, or you have no clue?
No, I don't think anybody can. I think that's, somebody's going to say, oh, I knew he was going to be great after he's great, after he's well known. And, there are some people that are just legitimately hilarious that just don't make it for who knows why. It's the luck of the draw. But I don't think you can, really say like a baseball player. I knew that kid, his swing and everything was so great. Because if you watch some of these guys on stage, yourself included, there's so much talent. There really is, but there's no rhyme or reason why one person becomes a big celebrity and another doesn't. It's the luck of the draw. You just don't know. And I'm simplifying it, but it's I couldn't tell. I can tell those that have a real passion for it as opposed to those that don't. And those that have a real passion for it, in my opinion, are more likely to succeed than those that don't have a passion for it. Because as you know, comedy is a bitch. It is not easy. You're getting your reviews right there. You're either getting laughs or you're not. So you have to have a passion to say to yourself, like, all right, I really sucked tonight, so I got to go home and work on it. Not like, I was so bad, I think I'll call it quits. No. You just can't. You have to have a passion, and that's a big thing. So to make it very simple, no, I cannot. I couldn't tell, and I don't know anybody that can. People will tell you they can, but I don't think it's there. I said some weird things to Adam Devine as he rose to stardom. Not that I said he wouldn't make it. Just like I was telling him to change his act as if I knew what in the world I was talking about, and I didn't. It's like, but it's you just don't have a clue. Can
Do
you
you,
tell? Can you tell?
I don't think so. You know, I mean, every now and then, you're right. It can actually be disappointing because I've known comedians where I'm like, this guy's so funny. And then I don't know what happens. Maybe life gets in the way and then who knows, maybe they fall in love, move away. I
Yes.
don't know. You just don't know, you know,
I
and, you
agree,
know,
and it's really crazy that what what it the things that happen to you that make you sidestep what you're
yeah,
doing. It's sort of like you know, you meet somebody, whether it's a male comic or a female comic, and all of a sudden, you know, that's more important, or you change something, and you know, so you end up heading in a different direction. But it's
yeah.
tough road to hoe, and
There's,
I give comedians, you guys, a lot of credit.
There's two things I wanted. I may be jumping around, but I want to make sure I get
That's
these in
okay.
before we move on. You know, the Hollywood Improv is such a special place to me, and I'll tell you why. I met my wife there, and we've been happily married for 23 years, and we met the Hollywood Improv.
Oh
You know,
wow, that's
you
great.
know, and a
Yes,
lot of
go
yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of times I think of that when I'm on that stage and I look back at that corner to the left over there where the comedians sit. And I'm just like, it takes me right back to the 90s and seeing my wife, and we hit off. And I thought I was super charming and witty, and it turns out you know, whatever. But
And she took care of that, right?
yeah. She's pretty charming and witty. And
how
yeah.
did you guys get introduced there?
You know what? I remember walking in and I looked to the left, and she was sitting in the back where usually the comedians are sitting. And I thought she was somebody else for a quick second. I just kind of waved and she waved. And then as I walked up, I realized like, oh, I don't. And then I kind of joked around with her a little
Yeah.
bit. And then in fact, I do remember the guy, the showroom manager he goes, guys, you got to be quiet if you want to take out to the bar. And I was like, sure. And she's like, I'm good. And I was like,
First
okay. Yeah. But
You
it
know,
was great though. Yeah. Comedy brought us together. Yeah.
I actually performed a wedding ceremony on the stage. I am, you know, an online minister.
Way to go.
I married Flip Schultz and his wife.
That's cool.
And also actually the very first two people I married, and they met at the Improv, but I didn't perform the ceremony there. We performed it at the mother-in-law's house. Was KP Anderson. I don't know if you know KP.
Yeah. I remember when he first moved to town.
And his wife, Leslie, and they're still very happily married.
That's
Every now and
awesome.
then. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was kind of like a side job that I didn't earn any money at.
Yeah.
My little sidestep.
That's cool, man. The little side hustle. I'll be your bartender and your minister.
That's right. In fact, right after I married Flip and his wife, I said, all right, guys, are we done? I got to go set up the bar.
Yeah.
I had to get to work.
Yeah, throwing rice and then throwing ice. Hey-o.
That's right. Reading their words of love, and then pouring their liquid love.
Yeah, that's cool. When you first came to LA, were there any comedians that you saw that you were like not going to say starstruck, but you were like, whoa, like that's, I mean, you grew up around comedy, but was there any that comes to mind where?
I have never been, so to speak, starstruck. I have seen, and when I started, and it's still, they're some of my favorite comedians. I can remember watching George Wallace when I first started at the Improv, and Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, those guys. And to me, they were just hilarious. It was nothing about, because I knew them, and I would just go in when I didn't work or whenever I could sneak in and just laugh. These guys were all, and still are, all very funny. They're the history of comedy right now.
when I see Jerry Seinfeld, I'm just like, it just makes me feel like warm and fuzzy. Like just what his comedy, like just his, every time I see him in an interview, every time I see him and I don't even know if I don't think he would be the type of guy that, he doesn't seem like he'd be super friendly to, but yeah. I'm okay. And I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. I get that when I say that warm, fuzzy feeling, I feel like he's successful. He's smart. He's funny. I like what I see, and I also know that, I'm not going to be like Jerry, I get it though. And I'm okay with that,
Well, yeah. And you got to remember that when I mention these names, even like Jerry, and I know them, but again, we're not hanging out buddies. But I will tell you one thing. I went to the wedding of Larry Miller and Eileen Kahn. And I think it was at the Beverly Hills Hotel, not hotel, one of those big hotels there in Beverly Hills. And the guys that got up and spoke and performed, this was like, you'd have to pay like $1,000 a ticket at least for this. George Wallace, wow. Jerry, Bill Maher.
Wow.
Gosh, I know, and Larry went up, Miller, and they were like, gosh, I really can't remember everybody, but that's only part of the list. It was an unbelievable time. And all of these guys came up together. They all knew each other and they all like worked clubs together. It's something that you don't have anymore because the field is too big now. Back then, like let's say when I started there in 79, 80, there were maybe 250 comics. So, they all pretty much knew each other. Now there's 250,000 comics.
Yeah.
And I'm not, again, I'm not denigrating the talent. I'm just saying that there's a lot more. And all those guys made it and they were all hilarious. And it was a very unique time. Back then.
I remember even when I started and I would, like in the end of the 80s, I was just out of high school, 90, 91. I used to read, about comedians. I knew of a lot of comedians. I saw them on television. There was even less comedians back then. And then it, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew. But I mean, one of the biggest shows back then when I started was A&E's Evening at the Improv.
Right.
That was a great, and Bud Friedman would be on there and celebrities would be hosting those shows and comedians would come out and,
I think that was the first comedy TV show, I think. I'm not positive.
One of the big ones, one of the biggest ones out there.
Oh, everybody was on that and wanted to be on it. It was the first thing that hit. I mean, I think not Ed McMahon, Doc Severinsen, who was Johnny Carson's band leader, emceed, and Johnny Carson came in and watched the show that night. And it was like, and he's one of the...
That is wild.
Yeah, he's one of
that is wild.
One of the 2 or 3 people that I've been kind of like enamored by because I got to serve him. He was very nice,
Yeah.
And it was just a trip. And that's what Evening at the Improv, I think, helped start the real comedy boom. And I think it ended in the mid 80s or late 80s. I don't even know, but the comedy kind of took a hit for a little while in the early 90s, and then it started booming again. And it's really, and it was booming now.
Yeah, when I started, people were like, "Oh, the boom is over," but I didn't even know what the boom was because I was just starting. So I was like, "Well, I'm happy with $50." And then again, I have 14 roommates, so
Well, the boom. Booms come and go, and they always will.
Yeah. And you know what? And thank God we have now, you could put your albums out. You can get the content at the audience easier with comedies. Like I have 4 comedy albums. I got the podcast, YouTube. Before I would just go on the road, do a show, and then I'm just gone. It's like, they don't remember your name really. They don't know who you were. It's like, it's tough, man.
It's a different world. It's something that none of us back then could have even anticipated or thought of. And like now it's, look, There are all sorts. Everybody and his mother has a podcast. I have a podcast. You know, Eddie's Bar at the Improv, guys.
I remember. Right I love the big party that was at the Improv. It was a wonderful party, and I remember Gary Cannon. He likes to roast everybody. He was making jokes. Yeah, do you remember what he said? Something like,
yeah. Gary ended up taking a lot of shit for that, for the things that he said, because everybody else that got up there, you know, they were told to roast me and they couldn't. They just, you know, I can't roast this poor old guy. But Gary, who was emceeing, you know, he started it and he went off on it. And he afterwards he came to me and he goes like, Eddie, I'm really sorry, man. I didn't, you know, I said, Gary, it's all good.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It was something like, you know, Eddie, everyone has a podcast here. Eddie the bartender, Antonio the busboy, Larry the cook, right. You know, or something like that. But it was, I think
one of the first things he said was like, I'm so glad we're all here to honor the greatest employee the Improv ever had, Antonio, you know. And it was like, you know, and he took off from there, and I think he was more upset along with a couple of the comedians, but I knew what I was in for.
Yeah. And Gary makes me laugh. He definitely, I've done Lake Tahoe with them several times, and I always laugh, and he's just a great, you know, he definitely has that roast style. Like one time I purposely walked in front of the stage, you know, because I knew he would roast me, because he was he's out there searching for things, and he's, oh, look, it's Darren Carter, the party starter. He has an album. You can buy it at the 99-cent store. Oh yeah, he's from Bakersfield or whatever. He just started roasting me, but I knew it. I knew he was, and I knew it, and it was hilarious. And
he's great. He and I, we go back and forth on Facebook at each other.
Oh yeah, so
Josh Nasser, you know, and it's just a lot of fun. And you know, that's kind of like the New York attitude. That's the East Coast attitude. That's how we relate to each other. You kind of like, you know, you make fun of everybody. And
they were busting his chops the other day, because they were like, you know, because he spoke at the Ralphie Mays Memorial, God rest his soul, and they were like, yeah, you try to do a headlining set at the memorial. What are you trying to do? Get stage time at a funeral? And you know, so I was like,
well, I've heard other. It's funny that you say that, because there've been so many memorials at the Improv, and for people, unfortunately, and so many times guys will get off, and other guys will go, you're not supposed to be doing a spot, you know? Yeah. and yet that's what guys do instead of just going up. And I guess people can't help it.
That reminds me of a story. Yeah.
At my thing, I think it was John Caponera.
Yeah.
He went up and he said, man, I got nothing to say. I don't know what to say. I'm just going to do my 5-minute set. Which he did.
You know what?
It was great.
Excuse me. I remember I went to Richard Jeni's memorial at the Laugh Factory, and I remember one of the comedians who was an impersonator, he was like, you know, Richard would have wanted it this way. And then he just went into his impressions, and it was kind of like, that was a little bit weird, you know? Like,
I would think so. I
am not a crook. I am not a crook. And all that old stuff. You know, it's like, what are you doing, man?
You know, there is, I know everything is fair game in comedy, but there is a time and place. And, you know, there's got to be a little bit of time before certain things are said or done. And that might not have been the best time to do that.
Yeah. There's I was talking to Fraser Smith, and I told him I was going to have, I get to talk to Eddie tonight. And he goes, ask him if he knows, there's a supposedly a famous story about Johnny Carson, kind of getting a little sloshed at the Improv. And
this was the only night that I ever served him, and he was there with, I guess, another guy, a friend of his, and they were drinking away, and they picked up 2 women and went back to his Malibu place.
Wow.
Driven by, do you know Bruce?
Bruce Smirnoff?
Yeah. Do you know him?
Yes. Shout out to Bruce if you're watching.
Yeah.
Hey, what's his catchphrase? He has like a catchphrase like "Oh no" or something like that.
Yes,
Like
so, yeah.
Well, something like that. Yeah.
Bruce drove them that night, and Bruce has got the whole he's got the whole routine down. But that was kind of a crazy night for Johnny. In fact, Bruce did a one-man play, and in that one-man play, he includes that story. And this, I'm talking 30 years ago, maybe more. God, I don't know how old I really am. Jesus, I've been around.
I drove Johnny Carson, babe, or something. He's got like a rhythm to his. Yeah, I drove Johnny Carson.
It's kind of weird when you can remember when somebody like Johnny Carson started on the Tonight Show and finished, and you say to yourself, "It's like, Jesus." I'm getting up there. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, Eddie, I got to tell you something. And I want to make sure I say the quote exactly. So my little 10-year-old nephew, we played him. We tried showing him some songs, some music, and I got a kick out of this for comedy. He says, he said that my 10-year-old nephew, he said that any song that's not auto-tuned sucks. That's what he says.
That's I'm with him.
Yeah. No, I'm saying he only wants to hear auto-tuned music. And if it's not auto-tuned, really? Really?
No, wow. It's 10-year-old. I was in the middle of watching a movie where this an action adventure. Some little girl who can't be more than 10 or 11 years old is saying and doing all these things. And I'm saying to myself, nah, it's just a script. She can't talk. And then you realize the kids these days, if you watch things like, what is it? America's Got Talent or whatever. These kids are smart these days.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're saying. They're brought up with the internet, with everything else.
Yeah.
The rest of us were brought up with these goddamn things called books that we had to read at school. Read The Grapes of Wrath or War and Peace, and I'm like, I still haven't finished War and Peace, and I probably never will. Yeah. But it's crazy. The kids are just hilarious and smart, and I sort of wish I was being brought up today, but 90% I don't.
Yeah.
90% I don't.
You know what's cool? My son, he just turned 13. He's a musician. Like I'm really lucky to be able to have a child that does this, to witness it firsthand. Like I can walk over to the piano and hit different notes, and we play a game, and he's got pitch perfect hearing. I think they call it perfect pitch hearing. He can be like D sharp, F sharp, fifth, whatever. And wow. He likes older music. Like he likes stuff like, that came out in 2018. No, I'm just kidding. he likes Jay-Z. Huh? No. Honestly, he loves, his favorite artist is Neil Sedaka. He loves Neil Sedaka.
Are you kidding? I was just talking about Neil Sedaka. I got to tell you, I'll tell you this story.
Tell me.
My father worked at a hotel in, somewhere in the Catskills. And at this moment, I'm blanking on the name of it. But the first year he went up there, Neil Sedaka was part of the band. That was the hotel's band. And the next year is when we went up there, he was gone because I think he had just released his first song and it was a big hit. But it was like I missed him by like a year, but my father, got to work with him because he was part of this group called the Norman Spiz Orchestra or something like that. I wish I could remember the name. I remember the name all the time, but you're making me blank here. But it was a hotel, I think, in Loch Sheldrick, New York, which is part of the Catskills. But he's like, that's funny that it's Neil Sedaka. God, I have a lot of stories. I know a lot. I've crossed paths with a lot of people.
That's so cool. What's funny is, because Neil, before my son got into Neil Sedaka, I would mostly, I knew like Calendar Girl. I knew like
love my
Calendar Girl, January, February. Neil is hilarious, by the way. I've seen him in concert a few times. He tells a great story about how he was in Beverly Hills at a restaurant, and this old woman came up to him and she said, "I was February," or something like that. And basically, he says it much funnier than I said, but he's basically saying that she looked like an old woman, and here he is looking the same, or and he tells all these great stories. Yeah.
Well, so many people, like another hotel we stayed at, Sid Caesar was the cousin of the owner of the hotel, and he would come up every summer with his family for a week, and he wouldn't perform that I can remember. But it's like, I got, while I was there, I was pretty friendly with his son, who was like, 6'10", 6'8", something. I mean, huge.
Wow.
Who I think became a doctor. But Sid Caesar, you talk about legends.
Yeah.
And
the show of shows.
Yep. Sid Caesar and Milton. I'll tell you another, Milton Berle. Milton Berle.
Hold that Milton Berle thought just real quick. Neil Sedaka, I want to say, I just looked this up. He played in a band at Esther Manor in the 1950s and 60s.
It wasn't Esther Manor. It was a different. It was a different hotel. But it was Neil Sedaka, and I'm sure he played. You know, they all played wherever they could back then. But I do know the Esther Manor. So it's God. Why can't I think of that? Does it say the name of the band?
I don't know. What would I even Google? I would Google.
Google Norman Spiz, S-P-I-Z-Z.
Norman Spiz, Neil Sedaka, Catskills.
Yeah. See what it says, because they pretty much know everything. Does it say anything? Maybe I'm making this up.
What? No. What do I? What do I Google? Norman
Spiz.
Norman Spiz
Orchestra.
I don't know. I'll do it later. It keeps. I don't. Yeah.
No, well, it's just
people at home are on the edge of their seat. What hotel was that? What band was that? Catskills, Neil Sedaka.
Maybe I made all this stuff up. I'm getting to the point where I probably making up a few stories here and there. But,
hey, I just Googled it. You've only been at the Improv for 3 years. No.
That's right. Yeah, he just walked in a couple of years ago, and we felt bad for him, so we let him stick around. And now, we wanted to make him feel good, so we gave him this little party. In hopes he'd get the hell out of here.
They're like, get it? It's a retirement party. You're like, I ain't retiring. All right, COVID, something. Get this guy out of here.
Yeah, that's why it's funny. When I went up, when they called me up to say something, I think I said, I got some bad news for you folks. This is not a retirement party. This is not a retirement. You're stuck with me for a little bit longer. So, and hopefully it'll be a little longer too.
Heck yeah.
Back to open up that room.
Milton Berle.
Oh, Milton Berle. Milton Berle asked my mother on a date. My mother was a dancer. Back in New York, she was a dancer with my aunt. The two of them were known as the Barson sisters in, in this old nightclub called the Old Romanian or something like that, which is, I think, where she met my father. And she and my father was a singer there. So they were dating. And when Berle came in, so this had to be, early 1940s, I guess. And I guess, so they were dating, and I don't know how big Berle was yet. He was already well known. But anyway, he asked my mother out, and my mother turned him down. And when she told me the story, I got pissed at her. I said, this guy could have been my father.
Right.
I could have some money for a change.
You could have inherited something else.
Oh, yeah. Right. There was
Google it, people. Milton Berle. Google it.
Yeah. He was rumored to have one of the biggest schlongs in Hollywood,
Exactly.
in the world,
Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, you know.
I heard some joke or some story where they were at the, oh man, I forget the name of it. Not Toastmasters, but like it's like a private club for comedians.
Oh,
It
was in Beverly Hills.
Yes.
And it's also in New York. It is, and you're making me blank on these things. And I can't think of it. I don't want to.
Oh my gosh, what's it? Hold on. Private club for comedians in New York and Beverly Hills.
Yeah, it was it just
Hollywood
closed.
Improv.
No, oh look, Hollywood Improv came up. That was interesting. Hollywood Improv. No, it's Friars Club. It's called the Friars Club. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I don't know is because they try to make a go of it on the West Coast, and I guess I don't know, but I'd heard some story where
it was there for quite a while on the West Coast, but from what I was told, and I really don't know anything about the Friars Club factually, but I think it was, just ended up being a meeting place for the comedians back then.
I heard a story with Milton Berle, and there was one of those late nights, and somebody was like, "Hey, Merle, I heard you had a large, well, I got a pretty big one too." And they're like, "Come on, let's have a little contest here." And then I heard somebody was like, "They're like, Merle, just take out enough just to beat him, and let's just get out of here." I don't know. These are these stories you hear, whatever.
I can believe that. And he performed. He performed at the Improv. Milton Berle.
That's cool.
He got dressed as a woman, which he did a lot. He performed there. Red Buttons, a lot of these older comics, even what's his name? What's the nasty one, so to speak? The guy that made fun of everybody.
Don Rickles. Don Rickles? Yeah.
Don Rickles. When they had some anniversary, there was a picture of about half a dozen of them standing on the stage with Bud. And, those guys mainly performed in New York when they were coming up. But, when the Hollywood Club opened in 73, I think, or 4, it was, it became home to a lot of them because it was such a homey atmosphere, such a nice, just a comfortable place to hang out.
Yeah.
And it still is. And like I said before, they're really working real hard.
Yeah.
To bring it back to what it was. It's going to be a little bit more difficult now, but they can do it.
There's something about when you walk in those doors at that Improv and that bar's right there to the left. And I see, for years I've seen you there and you just feel like you said, there's like a comfort there where it's like, I can just hang out. I can hang out for as long as I want, or I can leave, I can mosey around and mingle, or I could just, is it because as a performer, it's almost like home base. Like, this person may be performing in Cleveland, and then, I may be out in, Denver. And then all of a sudden, on Tuesday or Wednesday or something, you're going to see your buddies and see a familiar face.
That's the thing that the Improv has that I don't think any other comedy club has. And that is, we have that bar area. And I know others have bar areas, but they're not like ours in the sense that, just like you said, comedians mingle with each other. They hang out. They're like, it's a comfortable place to be. They're not going to get attacked by fans. They may occasionally, but, in general, no. It's like, and that if you're a comic and you want to be around comics and you don't want to go on stage or can't get on stage, you hang out at the Improv, and that's where everybody is. Yeah. And that's always been the way it is. And hopefully, we'll all get back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. In that book that I was telling you, I'm reading about the history of comedy. It's they were saying that back in like I think it's like the 30s, the 40s, that somewhere back then, that after the comedians would do their shows wherever, like those jazz clubs, they would go to different diners, and like the diners was like the place to hang out at. And they said there was almost like a system. Like if you were like one of the top level comedians, you would hang out at
Yeah.
I don't know, Cat's Diner or a certain diner or a deli, I should say.
Cat's
And then if you're,
Deli, yeah.
and then if you're like
delis.
and then like lower levels, and then like if you were like a, just a bottom feeder comedian, you would go to this other diner and deli, and I was man, that sucks that there's,
That was their improv. That was the place that, after they performed somewhere else, somewhere, they had no other place there was no place to hang out. That's also one of the reasons, if you listen to, if anybody listens to my podcast with Bud Friedman, and I have another one with his ex-wife, Silver Saunders Friedman, who founded the original improv with him in New York. That was one of the main reasons they opened that club. They wanted a place for, at that time, Broadway entertainers to go after their shows to hang out, to maybe improvise some songs or something like that, or just to chill. And so that's kind of like how the whole thing started. It didn't open as a comedy club. It was far from a comedy club. Comedy was the last thing I think that people did there. And then all of a sudden, I guess it just kind of switched around. He had, I think, people like Dustin Hoffman played the piano there in New York. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. There's a book by Trip Witzel and Bud Friedman that's out. And it's got all those little anecdotes about everything that if anybody really wants to hear a lot of the stories, because everybody's in that book, Seinfeld, Wallace, I mean, the whole world of comedy. So there's a lot of there's so many books that have a lot of interesting stories. One day I'll write mine.
Yeah. You know what you got to do? What I've been doing is anytime I think of a little story or I'm talking to somebody on the phone, I've been jotting that note down in my, on my phone, and I have little, just because sometimes it's hard to recall the stuff, but if you kind of like, I want to tell that one story about, now I have it in a little, that way when you do write the book, you're like, well, I've got 5 years of notes that are,
That's, you just made me think that about 10 years ago, I started writing things down and doing it, and then I stopped. But now you just made me want to do it again. So I'm going to open that old notebook, wherever it is, and start adding to it and writing, putting these anecdotes down. And
even if you just voice dictate it to it, like sometimes I'll voice dictate just to kind of get the gist, because that'd be interesting to hear about like that Catskills era and what it was like going up there and this over the summer and what, all that stuff. You'll be surprised. Like the more you go down memory lane, you're like, oh, I forgot that my dad would sing that song, and
stop you. This is my voice.
Ooh.
Memo. It's called a pen. I am so bad with all of these things. I had a commercial audition today that I had to submit, over whatever the hell it is. It took, thank God my daughter was here. It took me 2 hours to figure out how to do this thing. I know there's got to be a 10-second way to do it, but I couldn't get to this side.
I'm laughing because you have a pen, and I'm like, no, man, you got to auto-tune your memories.
No, here it is. It's right here.
There I was in the Catskills.
Everybody pulls out their phone and
I know.
Records a memo. I make sure I have a pad with me. So like, if you want to give me your number, I write it down, and people go like, great. What are you doing? What are you doing? It's like, just tell me your number. I'll send it, I'll call you and you'll have my number.
That's funny.
I come from a different era.
Let me ask you a weird quick question. Speaking of memory, do you happen to remember any old phone numbers, like from growing up in New York? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember.
You do?
I remember mine as a kid, which was, believe it or not, it was Academy 222317. Which was... See,
I wouldn't even know how to call that. I wouldn't even know how to call that. I don't even know.
It changed. It was Academy 222317. And I remember my aunt's, which was Monument 60966. I mean, it's... and it's really crazy, but those are, you know, and I'm not even probably remembering them correctly at the moment, but the numbers, everything was so different. I remember when they changed to where you had to do area codes. I'm going, why the hell do you have to do an area code? Well, because there are 5 billion more people now, and some are going to have the same number, but with a different area code. But
I remember, see, in my hometown where I remember actually growing up, the area code was 209, and then they split it, and then it's 559 and 209, 559. Yeah. So, you know, and
they did that with, in New York, the area code, I think, is 212. And the funny part about that is area code 213 is here in LA.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. It's, 3,000 miles away. Right. We're just going to make one number different. I can't imagine how many times people, you know, juxtapose the numbers and call the wrong post.
Eddie, man, I would love to have you back on the podcast. And if you would love, we've just barely hit the tip of the iceberg.
In closing, just let me know.
In closing, do you have any words of wisdom? I always ask our guests if they have something they'd like to share, something with maybe someone. Yeah.
My thing is be true to yourself always. And if you're going to do anything, do it with a passion. If you really love it and you really want to be a success, you have to be passionate about what you do. And that is part of being true to yourself. You can't just say, I want to do this and go work out twice a week and you become that. It doesn't work that way. But if you're true to yourself, you know how much you have to work on something. So those are my wonderful words of wisdom. I saw that once and I've never forgotten it. Thank you, Darren, for having me.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Eddie Berke.
And Darren Carter, the party starter.
My man. Hey, I'll see you soon, hopefully. And thank you for coming on. That was great. Thank you.
Okay, Darren, you take care.
We're done with this interview.
So the other day I was standing in the kitchen and my son was like, Dad, why did you write down that you weigh 190 pounds? And I'm like, I never wrote that. And he goes, look. And he held up my driver's license. And I was like, ew. My wife goes, yeah, you're not supposed to put down your goal weight. You're supposed to put your actual weight. And then she looks at it again and she goes, and did you put your goal height? And I was like, I might have made myself look taller and thinner on my driver's license. And then my son starts breaking out into a song by Roy Orbison. Remember that? He was like, lying to the DMV. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching my YouTube video. And if you get a chance, watch one of these and subscribe. All right. Have a great day.